Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on this episode, we're continuing the discussion that we started a few weeks ago on kind of getting through the list of questions that we've had from listeners over the last few months that weren't really applying to individual personal stories, but kind of general questions on leadership that we thought were relevant and that they kept kind of filling up the hopper. And I just want to kind of get through a lot of them to kind of get that list down. We've been having some great discussions on a few of these over the last few weeks. On today's episode, the very first question that I want to tackle, we've had sitting here for probably 6 months now, and it's kind of a big one to tackle, and so I kind of kept pushing it off. But this question is around work-life balance because I didn't want this to inherently migrate into a conversation around work from home, work from the office, because I don't think that's what this is. This is a different kind of question. This is to me, the question of work-life balance assumes that whatever decision has been made in your organization for your team when it comes to number of days in the office, number of days at home, whatever that is, that's all been settled, whatever that looks like to you. Because work-life balance applies whether or not you are working in the office 5 days or you're working from home 5 days or there's a hybrid in place. Whatever it is, work-life balance does play a part, and it looks different for every organization and, more importantly, for every person. And so I think this is why it's kind of a big one to tackle, assuming that that other stuff is worked out.
Yeah, I there's a lot of different ways that I'm hearing about this, and I will always do my best to kind of reframe the question. And when I hear the term work-life balance, I say, well, let's talk about that. Like, I think you mean work-life style. And they go,
interesting.
What do you mean? Right? They go, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, like balance by definition means that these are two opposing forces. Like there's either work or there's life, and there must be this 50-50 balance. And I'm like, and that's just not the reality for most people that I know.
Yeah.
Because how we define work, what we define, like, are we talking about a job? And are you wanting to work 40 hours a week? Are you wanting a job where you're part-time? Are you wanting a job where you're salaried and you're capable of like working a lot of hours? Or are we talking about, life? And are you in a place in your life right now where you could pour more time into your job to be able to learn and grow and develop that type of thing? Or are you a part in life right now where you have to pour more of your time into life, whether that's your responsibilities, family, things like that? So I always kind of reframe it by saying, well, balance means something to different people in different ways, like you kind of were talking through. But what it means to me is like, let's have a conversation about work-life style. And what are you looking to accomplish, and what does that look like for you personally? Because there's been times in my life where, I was, it was when you and I first met, right? Like I was at that time a salaried manager, and I was probably on average working 50, maybe 60 hours a week, right?
Right.
Like
but you were in your 20s and
like
didn't have any kids yet. And it was,
exactly, right?
Yeah.
And then I was also putting in probably another 20 to 30 hours a week in a recording studio.
Right.
Like I didn't view the recording studio as work, but I was working. I was there. I had clients. People were paying me to do things with them. But like in my brain, that wasn't work. That was the life side of the lifestyle that I wanted. So again, this conversation, I think in my mind, is less about the balancing of the hours of a week and more about the lifestyle that you are looking to live. And how do you figure out ways to make those things work for what you need, both personally and professionally?
Yeah, I think that's really close to accurate there. I think, I like how you say it's different for each person, because you're right. Like if you take two people who are doing the same role and working the same amount of hours per week, one of them might feel like that is in order. Like that is about whatever the current balance is, whatever it works with their lifestyle. And so that's fine. Someone working right alongside them might not feel the same way, even though they're doing essentially the same amount of work. And so I agree with you that work-life style plays a part. I think your example about putting the work in the studio, I think that informs a lot of what this looks like, because when someone says, I need to have better work-life balance, or they're talking about it in general, they're applying it to themselves. In the moment, that person perceives an imbalance in the amount of work they're putting in versus the amount that they're putting into the rest of their lives. And that might be the case for that person, but not for somebody else. But when it comes to doing things that might be your work, but that are intrinsically more fun, or that speak to you in terms of what your passions are or what you love doing, it can feel not as much like work, and therefore it doesn't weigh as heavily on the work side of the work-life balance scale as it would for somebody whose job was emotionally draining, with a leader they couldn't stand, doing work that they didn't love doing to begin with. And so this is another reason why I think it is absolutely individualized, because you could have two people working the same amount of hours, and the inherent job is something that one person is just driven by. They love this job so much, and their coworker is like, I can't stand this job, but I don't know what my options are, and I feel like I'm stuck here. And that person is going to feel like any amount of work is too much work on the work side of the work-life balance, right? And so you have to, I think this includes a discussion around making sure that people are cast right. They're cast correctly, because you're going to have almost potentially unreasonable expectations from some people on what they consider proper work-life balance for them if they don't inherently get anything out of what the job is to begin with. If they don't like being there, then they're never going to want to be there.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think it really uncovers that the role of the leader in a lot of this space is to just have conversations, understand, ask questions. And then again, we've talked about this on the podcast for many years, but there's just a different motivating factor of a lot of the workforce now, around passions, creativity, around things like side hustles, small businesses. There's just this entrepreneurial feel of what people want to get into, and talking about that, celebrating that, creating spaces to have dialogue. Like when you're able to talk to people about their passions and what they're looking to achieve and how they want things to work and in life and in profession, it just allows you to have conversations like you're just talking about, which is like, let's talk about this. And what are you thinking about in the short term? What are you thinking about in the long term? What does that look like? How do you progress, in a career? How do you find a way that you can both be successful at work, but also find time to dig into your hobbies and, your passions that you want to get into? A lot of times I have a lot of questions that people ask me, like with the podcast. They're like, man, how do you have the time? Where do you find the time? And I'm just like, well, you have to prioritize it and you have to be intentional. And there is time if you're willing to look for it. It's just a matter of where are you applying your time? And I was like, look, and there's times of my life where I've had more of it. And there's times in my life where I have to be really, really particular when and how we spend time in this type of thing. I remember when we first started this podcast, my girls were very young, babies, sleeping. I remember I used to put them to bed. I used to go into the office that I had in the house that had an open space. It wasn't even a door there. And I kind of had to quietly go podcast in the corner at 11:30 p.m. at night, my time.
Right.
Right. We started the show. If you listen, we used to always laugh. Like I said, if you listen to those first, 30, 50, 75 episodes, they'll say, man, why was your voice sound so much deeper back then? And I was like, well, because I was tired and I was talking all day and my voice was in a place where this is all I got left. And I'm like, but that it's just, I found the time. It required me to have to stay up a little bit later, but it was worth it because it was a passion project of ours. Mm-hmm. But you just got to figure out ways to make it happen. But I say all that because that's the type of dialogue. If you're looking to have a real conversation about work-life style, you're going to have to get into those levels of details to help people feel great about the work that they're doing and feel responsible for the job that they have, while at the same time understanding that there may be other things in their life that's pulling their time and attention.
I think you're right about that. I think it's an interesting segue into the next question on this list that I want to talk about, because I think that they're related. We talked about the work-life balance feeling more in line, or an employee being more kind of content with whatever that balance is when they have kind of a general love for the work that they do. And one of the questions that we were asked here by one of our listeners is around inspiring intrinsic motivation in people. And I think this is an important one to talk about because, obviously if an employee has intrinsic motivation for doing the job, then it is far easier to have that work-life balance feel like it's in line. And it's far easier to do what you do and love what you do longer without needing external incentives. And I'm not saying external incentives aren't important. These, if it's a job, it's a job. We're not volunteering here, right? A job assumes that there's pay for doing it, but that doesn't mean that an intrinsic motivation isn't important. I can think back on my career and the jobs that I put my effort into the most, the ones that I poured my soul into, were ones that I felt like there was an intrinsic motivation. I gravitated towards that work, whatever it was at the time, and it inspired me, and I felt like it felt less like work. And were there days that I was emotionally spent by the end of the day? Sure. But it didn't feel like emotionally spent and, oh my God, I don't want to do that again. It was emotionally spent, and yet I'm excited the next day to start it all over again, right? And if you feel that way about something that you're doing, then that is a very, very good place to be when it comes to your job. And I think, I don't want to look at this like there's a lot of cynicism around this, because I think there are a lot of people. I think a large part of the workforce has never had or felt an intrinsic motivation for any job they've had, and to them it has always been about work is a means to an end. I need to pay my bills. I need to do this work, and then that's separate. And whatever it is, it's just whatever the work that accomplishes that the best, and then whatever's left as much time as I have left, and I can try to maximize that for the stuff that I really love and that's really important to me. And I'm not saying that every job can be just kind of like this perfect kind of meshing of like this Zen moment of, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I want to do. This is amazing. But there are steps that you can take to increase that. There are steps you can take to make sure that you are in the right spot, or that you can love the work that you're doing more than just what does this paycheck look like? Because if you're doing a job that only has that paycheck, that external motivation, then it's really, really hard not to burn out on it eventually. You have to have more than that if you want to continue liking the job and not having it be something that stresses you out or that you end up not wanting to go to eventually.
I think it's hard to paint with a broad brush when it comes to like intrinsic motivation and like how we subjectively believe on a spectrum, like what's the percentage that is now like, okay, that's acceptable. Like I feel that you have a passion for this job now. You know what I'm saying? Because that's such a lens that we use for ourselves, or that
Right.
we think is the thing. And so I think about it less about are you intrinsically motivated and passionate for the job that you have? I step into those conversations with an assumption that there's some reason why this is the job, the career, the industry that you're in. There's something here that works well for you. And that there are parts of the job that I'm sure are way more fun and way more engaging in other parts of the job. And again, I like you, I've grown up in retail my whole career. So a big part of what I enjoy about retail is that it is a people's business. There are people around you constantly, all the time, different people, different things, different situations, different issues and problems, but you are constantly hanging out with different people. And that for me gives me energy. So just, I'm aware of that. I know that. There are absolutely parts of the work that I do that like, I just love this. I could do this all day. And there are parts of the work that I have to do that I'm just like, I would prefer not to, but I know this is a part of my responsibility or my job. So I can understand that, that my intrinsic motivation to both be around people, to inspire and to motivate people, to help people achieve things and exceed their own expectations, That for me is the top of the headline. The work underneath that, what that might be within retail, I could find a lot of ways to enjoy some of that and do those things. But for me, I understand the larger picture there. So typically, when I think of people, I think less about the tactics of the job that they're doing and more about the person, what motivates them both internally. And sometimes the internal intrinsic motivation is because they have a responsibility that's external. They have a need and a reason to want to work. They are looking to accomplish something in their life. They're here because it is just the job that they've got, because they're trying to do something else in their life. I'm okay with that so long as we talk about it and we understand how do you use that to inform and drive you to do well here. And that's kind of where I go with the intrinsic motivation stuff.
I agree with that completely. I think intrinsic motivation just can't be something that is, monetary. Like if I feel like I'm only doing this because of the money, then that is not something that is sustainable, I think. But if I'm doing this because this works with my school schedule to let me accomplish whatever degree I want. If I'm doing this because the schedule allows me to spend 30 hours in the studio doing music recording, then that's intrinsic motivation. There's something that you can inherently tie the work to, that this work allows you to do. And that has to be a part of that conversation that you have within your own head in order to feel like there's that intrinsic motivation. If it's literally just I work and I get a paycheck and that's it, that's when you can run into some problems if you're not able to tie it into something bigger. And you're right. If that bigger thing doesn't necessarily have to be something at the job, it could be something in your life, but there has to be something there. Otherwise, I think it's really difficult to sustain, especially at a high-performing level.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1-minute hack. But first, a few words from our sponsors.
All right, this episode's 1-minute hack is about purpose-driven leadership. We talk about helping employees find intrinsic motivation as opposed to having it just be external. That is inherently purpose-driven leadership, is helping employees find meaning in their work. And don't roll your eyes at that, because finding meaning in your work, again, isn't necessarily about the work itself. It's about what matters to each employee individually, and you as the leader helping them find meaning in the work that they're doing in spirit of whatever that thing is. And so if the work that they're doing is allowing them other things in their life, and that is the reason they do it, that's fine. You can find purpose in your work doing it that way. If the reason that you're doing the work is because you have a very strong affiliation with whatever your client or customer base is, and you're very passionate about helping them and making sure that their lives are better, then that's fine too. There's no wrong way to find purpose in your work, as long as it's something that drives you and allows you to feel like you can put your all into it. And as a leader, it's your responsibility to help each individual person on your team find that purpose, find that reason that makes them wake up each day and say, it's worth it again. Today again is worth it, not just yesterday. Or I don't want to go again. If you're saying that every day, then it means that either A, you're in the wrong role, or B, you haven't found the purpose in the role. Try to find it. Try to help your employees find it. And if you can't, then try to help them find the types of roles that would allow them to find that purpose. Because sometimes your job as a leader is to help people understand that there might be a better place for them to be than the one they're currently at.
Yeah, I think it's just the conversation and the dialogue, and when you can align somebody's interests and passions with the work or parts of the work that they may have within the job. I think that's always a good move. I think it's always super helpful. I also think, though, that a part of that conversation is around the totality of the job that they have and the work that they have to do, because part of it has to be, if you want to achieve and do things that are more aligned with what you enjoy doing, there are going to be parts of life and work that you're going to have to get good at least the minimum expectation of things that you might not enjoy doing or that you might not naturally be good at. So I think that there has to be a good conversation in the whole elements around both topics that we talked about, around the work lifestyle, Let's talk through some of that, and then let's talk about what motivates you. And I think that those conversations they can live hand in hand when you're looking to really look at somebody in total as who they are as a human. And then by having those conversations, I think that really helps to unpack some of the things that will allow them to have the biggest opportunity to be most successful in role, and for you as a leader to understand what are the things that you can do to help them, guide them to be more successful at work, but also achieve the things they want to achieve.
Yeah, I got spot on. I think that there's no way to do any of that without first knowing exactly what matters to this employee. And each employee is different. So start with the conversation, start with making sure that you have the type of relationship with your employees that means that when they tell you something about what's important to them, that A, they want to tell you that to begin with, and B, that you can rely on it being accurate. And that won't happen unless they look at you as someone they can trust and to go to with this information. And they won't do that unless they think that there's something in it for them to do that for. So if they don't think you can help them accomplish their goals, why would they tell you what they are to begin with? So show them that you're the type of leader who takes the responsibility seriously of helping them achieve their goals, and they will start to share their goals more with you, and you'll have a better picture about what it is that each employee wants that you can help drive them towards or help get them. And you will see an increase in the productivity and in the engagement and in the performance level that they do on the job, because they will find more meaning and more purpose in that work because they've been able to tie it to something that they want to accomplish in their lives, whether it's at the job or it's something external.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.